Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well-being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne. I'm still stick handling a wee bit of congestion, so I apologize if I sound a wee bit snotty. I am doing my best, and I'm very happy to be here. And I am extra excited. I feel like I always start by saying, hey, I'm super excited. I'm extra excited because so many people asked me questions about last week's episode on habits. And I am really looking forward to sharing with you some of those questions and some of my answers. So thank you to each and every one of you for being here in this moment for us to have this conversation, and also for those who have reached out. And I'm looking forward to spending some time today here chatting a wee bit more about one of my favorite topics, which is habits. As I started off last day, and I'll share it again because it's so good, as our buddy Alcine Jr. would say, I'm going to say it again because it's so important. The habits you have make up the quality of your life. So if you take a moment to think about your habits, they will make up the quality of your day. They'll make up the quality of your experience. So this is why I think we need to be talking about habits, because it's so instrumental in orchestrating these big, beautiful lives, which I want for each and every one of you. All right, so do a baby little recap, just a mini little recap. Habits are behaviors that have been repeated to the point where there's a degree of familiarity, there's a degree of almost feeling automatic, and it is different than an addiction, which ties in physiologically and biologically into this idea of a compulsion. So what we're talking about is the behaviors that are habits. We're not talking about compulsions in terms of addictions. We're not talking about obsessions. We're literally talking about the ABCs, the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequences. Okay. Having said that, the idea that I thought I could share in response to somebody's question, actually, several people asked about this. They said, Robyne, you talked about the habit of gratitude last day. You talked about the habit of a morning activity like walking each day, the habit of even, having a meal and really connecting versus being distracted, like on our telephones and things like that. What I thought could be useful, because the person asked, and I really love this question, if we had to think about like one habit that we should start with, like where do we even begin when there's this whole constellation of habits that we can be thinking about? Where do we get our best return on our investment? To help us figure out what habit, what habit is going to give us that great return on our investment, and to answer our friend's question, I want to tell you a wee bit about what's called the health hierarchy. I love sharing this idea with people called the health hierarchy. What this is this idea. Here we go. Just take a moment to think about how long you can go without movement and exercise for. Okay, so just take a moment to think about it. Well, we know that people can live a very long time actually without movement and exercise. It might not be a really high quality, perhaps, type of life, but we know people can sustain life for a very, very long time, not without movement and without physical activity. If you think about something like food, we know people can live about 3 weeks without solids and food. We know that about 3 weeks. And after that, the body will start to, well, it won't even function. It will start to shut down. We know that, for example, water, that people could sustain life for approximately 3 days without water. We won't even get into that James Franco movie, 127 hours. We're not even going to go there, but just so you know, it did pop into my mind. 3 days we can survive without water. Okay. So 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water. There's some research that talks about sleep. The average and what they talk about sometimes is this idea between like 5 to 7 days is like it's like the extreme of what people can survive without sleep. There's a reason why sleep deprivation is a form of torture. So food, a long time, sleep, a little bit less long time, water, 3 days, we're cooked. But the most important life ingredient is breath. 3 minutes. The average person can survive without oxygen for about 3 minutes. Now, I appreciate that Kate Winslet did some crazy training where she can do it for like 9 minutes and like, Tom Cruise Mission Possible, his stuff, crazy. The average bear, the average person, we're talking about 3 minutes. What does this have to do with anything? We know that if we start so small, you cannot fail, which was a theme from last day, and we just start the practice of a breath exercise, 5 minutes a day. Just spend 5 minutes a day focusing on some breath work. That ties in mindfulness, that ties in just that pause of all the mental chatter and all the noise and all the pressures and stressors of adulting, all of the things, just 5 minutes of breath work and start to build on that. And what we know is that when we start at the bottom of the health hierarchy and we work our way up, it actually starts to positively impact the ease, accessibility, and availability of other behaviors up the hierarchy. So, what does that mean? If we can really lock in with a 5 minute breathwork practice, you then are more likely to drink some water. And it doesn't matter where the water is coming from. I get so concerned right now that folks are thinking that water needs to be complicated. Oh my goodness. The new Stanley will not make you drink more water. Okay. Like literally just drink water. And I'm mindful, yes, there's information about plastics and information about all these different things. And yes, there is already hydrogen in your water. You do not need to follow that person on TikTok that's telling you to put hydrogen in your water. Just drink water. All right. Please just drink water. And what the research again shows, if we have some breath work practices that we do consistently and we make sure that we're drinking some water, what happens is we have what they talk about in the research, what's called a halo effect. And the halo effect starts to make available this kind of like these other health related behaviors. And we know that when people adopt a breath practice and they're drinking enough water, they start to make different choices about their nutrition. They start to make different choices about their sleep. They start to make different choices about their physical movement. So we can grow these habits that really serve us. Because again, remember, you can't hate yourself healthy. So often people start at the top of that health hierarchy and like try to punish themselves into submission and call it motivation. They call it discipline, right? Like this, this grinding kind of mentality. My friends, it doesn't need to be that complicated. It doesn't have to be that hard. We can actually go ground up and build a solid foundation that's really, really helpful to us to continue to add habits and behaviors for us to feel good. So I hope that makes sense. Just recently, I was talking at an event and they were talking about their goals. And this one gentleman said that his goal was to do high intensity HIIT training 6 days a week, like starting on Monday. I love how we take a good Monday as our start point. If you really want to be bold, start a new habit on like a Thursday, right? Like Monday, don't have a great track record of, starting new behaviors. We've already kind of broken a lot of promises to ourselves by Monday afternoon. Pick a Thursday. Why not? But this gentleman said Monday, 6 workouts, high intensity, 45 minutes a day, no matter what. And I said, okay. And I said, sir, can I encourage you and invite you to think about the week leading up to that practice? Could we put some breath work in there? Could you do just 5 minutes a day of breath work leading up to this very audacious goal of you having these high intensity workouts? And the gentleman said to me, there's no way I could be able to breathe 5 minutes a day. He's like, I won't be able to make time for that. It's not possible. And in that moment, I just kind of stood there awkwardly thinking of what I should say and should not say. And I asked the gentleman, I said, sir, if you couldn't commit to breathing 5 minutes a day, help me understand how you think you're going to have time to do 45-minute HIIT workouts 6 times a week if you can't commit to breathing 5 minutes a day in a breathwork practice. And it was just this kind of moment where he said, like, oh, I'll figure it out. And I think unfortunately, we kind of overestimate what we think we're going to be able to do. And we actually like underestimate the value of planning, the value of actually like, okay, let's build up this practice versus let's start at the top and then try and figure our way into this like submission into kind of beating ourselves into healthy habits, which we know doesn't work. So that's the health hierarchy. So to answer the question, where do you even start? 5 minutes of breath work. And if you want to get all wilding out, just like 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes midday, and maybe 5 minutes at the end of the day. 15 minutes of breath work will radically transform how you feel. Like, isn't that remarkable? Like, I'm so encouraged that small, healthy habits can actually yield remarkable results. Another idea I wanted to share to answer somebody's questions is they said, Robyne, can you just give me more examples of healthy habits? Like, I just want more examples because there's so much misinformation and there's so many ideas out there. What do I even think about? So to be able to answer that question, what I thought what would be useful is to take the Stress Wisely model that I developed that talks about the 8 realms. And I wanted to just play around with you and share with you some of the habits that I have kind of sprinkled and peppered in the 8 realms of well-being. I thought that could be of service. So here we go. We already kind of talked a lot about the physical ones, right? So physical, the first realm of Stress Wisely. For me, my morning routine to get outside, this idea. I also like to do this other little habit for my physicality that I talk about it, and this is inspired by my dad. This idea of like watering my mistakes. Okay, what the heck are you talking about? So my father is remarkably talented. He is so skilled with talents and gifts. And carpentry happens to be one of my dad's many, many, many gifts and skills and talents. And when he is working on a project, and I remember this all growing up, when he is building something, working on a project, and he makes a mistake, or the person he's working with makes a mistake. Let's say they're cutting something, measuring, and they realize, oops, I did that incorrectly. My dad would say, water break. So whenever anybody like stumbled or he stumbled, like he would say water break, which means we need to pause, minimize the blast radius of making more mistakes, and we're just going to rehydrate. We're just going to catch our breath, regroup, rally. And I love that example growing up because I would use that as this idea of, oh, I'm supposed to water my mistakes. So if I'm, writing an email and then realize, oh, I forgot to send the attachment, to me, anytime I make a little micro mistake, I pause and I'll say water break and I'll go drink water. That is a habit that I have. Now, the opposite of that habit, something that would be hindering it, is that if perhaps you have the habit where you make a mistake and instead of pausing and just grabbing some water and regroup, you like beat yourself up. You call yourself mean names in your head. Like that is a habit, but probably one that isn't serving you. Calling yourself names will not change your behavior. It's just going to add more shame and more kind of uncomfortableness, discomfort to a situation that's already uncomfortable. So I hope you too can perhaps adopt the habit of watering your mistakes. Okay. I also think goalies do this, by the way. I think goalies do this. We've been watching a lot of the NHL playoffs, and I always love whenever there's a goal, the goalie literally takes water. Totally digressing because I know that's what I have a tendency of doing. I could not stop laughing a wee while ago. Hunter and I were in Washington and we went to a Capitals game. And it was actually really cool because Ovechkin was being acknowledged for breaking the goal scoring record that was held by Wayne Gretzky. It was a super cool experience. Anyway, we're there. And as they were introducing all of the players on the Capitals, they had the player's name, his position. I can't remember. So it was like name, position. And then are you ready for this? At the bottom of the monitor, it said the song that they play when they score a goal, right? So it's like they all have like, if they score a goal and they're home, this is the song that they would play. I kid you not. The goalie for the Washington Capitals, I laughed because he had when I score a goal, this is the song I play. And I believe it was Toby Keith, like the random country dude, Toby Keith. And I laughed so hard because I'm like, I wonder if has he ever scored a goal? Like, has Toby Keith ever been played in the Capital One Washington Capitals arena? I don't know. If you know, please let me know because I thought that was adorable that the goalie had a goalie goal song. Not like when it scored on him, like literally if he scored a goal. Very few NHL goalies have scored a goals. Anyway, clearly I digress, but I think that's adorable. Back to regular scheduled programming. The second realm, emotion. What are some habits that we practice or we talk about when it comes to emotion? I think one of the ones that often gets overlooked are emotional like habits of mind. And what I mean by that is I have a habit, and I've shared this before, I don't really trust anything I think or feel after 8 p.m. I have an emotional cutoff where whatever I feel, whatever I'm thinking about after 8 p.m., I hold it very, very gently. Because something that I've learned is that my emotional capacity, my intellectual capacity after 8 p.m., it is so diminished. Now, yes, that's usually by the time my meds have worn off as somebody with ADHD. And usually I'm at that point where I'm not feeling well resourced. So I just have a habit that when emotions start to get big and heavy and complicated at the end of the night, I just gently say, hi, I see you. Not sure where you're coming from, but we'll take this up tomorrow. We'll take it up tomorrow. That's a habit that I use to help manage the emotion piece. Another habit in the emotion category is I try to do my best to I appreciate the moment. And what I mean by that is like the same way when things aren't going very well and I'm feeling like emotions of, disappointment or heaviness, and I give my attention to that, I try to do the same as well when things are positive. I think we have a tendency to like jump and bypass and move quite quickly through some of the positive emotion. I really like to like enjoy the wins, right? So I have a habit that when I win something or I have a positive emotion or a positive outcome, that I like on purpose, I have a habit of like holding on to it. I give that like it a little squeeze. Like I make sure that I'm keeping this in that big scorecard of life because I don't want to miss the moment. I don't want to miss the wins. I don't want to miss how good it feels like to have a hug from your big when he comes home from school. I don't want to miss what it feels like to see Ava's excitement about something that she's looking forward to. I don't want to rush those moments. So I have this habit of when there's a good feeling, I give it a little hug. I like literally, with all my mental strength, hold that moment and I give it a little hug, which ties in the practice of gratitude. I hope this is useful. Speaking of practices, let's talk about intellectual. What are some habits of mind that help? I have to write things down. I am somebody that loves a good list. I love a list so much that if it doesn't look great, sometimes I'll write a second list and I will rewrite things to scratch off that second list just because I love getting my thoughts out of my head into paper form. It's the idea of making the invisible visible. So, a good habit when I'm practicing or problem solving or working on something is to write things down. I also write reminders to myself. I make sure to capture moments because I'm not going to rely on my memory, which sometimes is tired, sometimes it's overloaded as the oracle that's trying to hold on to all the pieces of information in this household. I don't want to rely on that on things that I want to make sure that I don't forget, I don't drop, I don't misplace. So writing things down is a habit. I particularly love writing things down on the back of envelopes. I was actually kind of cheesed when I went to paperless bills and all the things because I missed having a good envelope to write on the back of, especially grocery lists. I love writing a grocery list on the back of a used envelope. I think it's a silent connection with my late mom. I'm not sure why. I'm pretty sure a lot of her grocery lists were on the back of envelopes. That's maybe why I do it. But nevertheless, getting the invisible visible, it's an intellectual habit that can make a difference. Okay, let's keep going. This one's kind of fun. Environmental. What kind of habits, and somebody asked me this actually, like what habits in your environment can set you up for success? Well, for me, and again, I can only speak from my own experience, I really love having spaces that are organized. It helps my ADHD part of my brain just feel safe, feel well resourced when things have a place. And I believe the example that they use, and I wish I can attribute who first presented this example, was the idea of like, if you see a spoon lying on the floor in the family room, let's just say, you automatically know that the spoon has a home. It like a very few places that spoon belongs, either like in the little spoon cubby system, whatever the utensil cubby system looks like, maybe the sink or the dishwasher, right? Like there's like very specific places the spoon belongs. For somebody with ADHD, one of the ways we interpret our world is essentially it's a lot easier when things have a place and being able to put things back in the place. So, what's a habit that I use that helps things kind of get into place? If I don't we have a kind of a rule in the house, a loose rule that I think I'm the only one who follows, is you don't go upstairs empty-handed. And I even remember when the kids were little, I remember like I would always put things on the stairs with the like little wish that the next person that walks by would like pick them up and like carry them to the next floor. I vividly remember one day though, I doing a little bit of, I don't know if it was quite a rage clean. It was definitely a moving quickly clean through the house. And I'd put so many things on the staircase. And I came around the corner and I kid you not, Hunter and Ava were actually climbing the railing on the outside of the staircase with these big smiles on their face. And of course, I see this risk danger, right? Mama bear alarm goes off. And I'm like, what are you doing? And Hunter said, I thought you built us an obstacle course. I love the way Hunter's mind works. I'm like, no, little one, I wasn't building you an obstacle course. I was literally inviting you to carry this stuff upstairs. And Ava said, it would be way more fun if this was just an obstacle course. Sister, I feel you. So we don't go upstairs empty handed. The other little habit around organization is that when I pick something up, if this isn't a collecting things on the stairs type of a moment, if I pick something up, I put it back in its place. I don't put it in a pile to take it to another pile to take it to another pile, like maybe somebody else in my household does. I like to, if I pick it up, I will actually walk it all the way to where its home is. That's a habit in the environment that contributes to helping feeling better. Let's keep rolling. I hope this is useful. And I'm really excited to hear about what your peppered health and well being habits are in your realms as well. So please feel free to reach out and tell me. Okay. So the next one in terms of financial habits. Oh gosh, this is a goodie. Jill, this is Jill, one of my besties. This is her lane of expertise. One of the little habits that I find with this that I find helpful is this idea about, is this a need versus a want? Now, as a caveat, if you notice, it's like, no, this is just a want. There is zero judgment. Trust me, you want to be, you want me with you whenever you're making a purchase because I'm all about this idea that life is short. I oscillate between life is short, you only live once, and save for the future. But if you're like sitting there on the edge of it, like, should I make this purchase, especially if it's a treat for yourself? I will be the person that says, yes, you want to do that for yourself. Life is absolutely short. Enjoy the thing, buy the thing. I hope that makes sense. But again, a practice of a habit is the notion of, is this a need versus a want? So even just pausing, is this a need versus a want, right? Like just that little bit of habit of mind, of discipline. And again, there's no judgment if it happens to be a want. And I think it was Hunter who shared with me his strategy around financial kind of management on one topic. And Hunter said, we were talking about need versus a want. He goes, Mom, the rule of thumb I use is I ask myself, can I buy it twice? Can I afford to buy it twice? Because if I can afford to buy it twice, then I can afford it. I'll buy it. If I can't buy it twice, if I can't afford to buy it twice, then I'm not going to buy it. I don't have enough breathing room. And I'm like, dude, that is such an amazing principle of financial habit building. Where did you learn that? Jay-Z. Jay-Z taught Hunter that indirectly through some random rap song. So a little thank you and shout out to Jay-Z for teaching Hunter a really great strategy that he has implored over the last 2 years living on his own at university. Okay, need versus want, just that little pause. Another little habit is putting things in the cart and just taking a breath before I hit buy. Okay. And maybe it's a glass of water, maybe it's a quick stretch. If I could, do a 24-hour little cool off window, that's pretty good too. Because what I've learned, the act of putting things in a cart when you're online shopping, you already get the dopamine hit. Okay. You already get the dopamine hit. It's the gathering, it's the collecting, it's the accomplishing, it's the doing. You get the dopamine hit. And you're in this place where we're looking for that digital dopamine by simply the act of forging or putting things in a cart nowadays. that when it arrives a day later or 2 days later or whatever, you're not even really excited about it. Right. So, yeah, maybe there is something you order and you're excited about. But more often than not, if things are showing up and it's like, oh, yeah, I forgot I ordered that, it's usually the sign that that behavior you were doing at the onset was just the hunter gatherer, the tired part of our brain that just wants to collect and gather, because the frontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, is exhausted from all the day of adulting. So our kind of older reptilian brain of just gather, hunter, collect, we get it in our cart and we get some digital dopamine, we feel better. Moving along. When we think about our habits of work or occupational, again, we talked about this last day. I use a practice that's called the 3-2-1 method, 3 hours of uninterrupted time on task to do important work. I try to do about 2 hours of light work, transactions, backs and forth, meetings, things like that. And I try to learn an hour a day. When I have a full work day, that doesn't involve travel, doesn't involve events, doesn't involve teaching, what I try to do is 3-2-1, 3 hours of focused work. And I can get done more in those 3 hours when I put myself in this like emotional, physical bunker, so to speak, minimize distractions, noise, no email, no phone. I show up for that. And what I am able to do in that 3 hours uninterrupted, I would argue is probably more than on average, you would be able to do in a full workday, even 10, 12 hours of work. I can do that in 3 hours. Thank you, Dr. Maria Montessori, who taught the power of an uninterrupted 3 hour window of high performance. Then 2 hours are emails, transactions. An hour is dedicated to connection, growth, and learning. So a 3-2-1 method. That is a habit I use on work days when I am working from home. Okay, we got one more here, the spiritual. A spiritual habit that I practice, and I again touched on this last day too, is I'm somebody who said we practice grace before meals in our house. It's just this way of being present, being grateful, being aware, being in community. The other kind of practice that ties into that spiritual practice is looking for moments in a day of awe and wonder, like just looking for the beauty in the world. And I appreciate that there's so much noise and there is so much negativity, and there is miracles happening all around us. And it was actually Einstein who said we can either look at nothing as a miracle or everything as a miracle. And that's something that I do. I look for the light in other people. I look for the joy. I look for the beauty because it's there. It's a beautiful world, even when it is unwell. There are still moments in that. So again, the habit of mind of, saying grace, the habit of mind of looking with intention to find hope, to be able to see joys, to see good. Those are spiritual habits on top of obviously, how we practice by going to mass and celebrating the sacraments. Like those are habits that have become a sacred ritual. I hope this is helpful. What I wanted to illustrate are those little peppered habits that we can put in the day that again ties into this really impacting the quality of our lives. Now, the other little piece that I wanted to share, which I thought would be useful when I was kind of trying to get a few ideas to answer people's questions. The questions that somebody said are, Robyne, what are some of your bad habits? Now, again, I'm going to pause and say they aren't bad habits because it's not a moral issue. But what are some habits that you do that you notice aren't very helpful? They did call them bad habits, but we're going to reframe that. Habits that are hindering my goals. And I love the person asking me this question because they said, it seems like you have all your ducks in a row. Sister, my ducks are not in a row. If you could see what those little feet are, and those little, I was going to call them paddles. They're not paddles, the little web feet underneath. If you could see what my little duckies are doing under the water, you would realize my ducks are not in a row. They're not even in the same body of water. They're not even all ducks. I think there's a pigeon in there. But what are some of those things that I do that are hinders? So I thought I have like 5 of them for you because I want you to know this is a practice and we're all trying our best to figure it out. Number 1 for me is rushing. When I rush, I make mistakes. When I rush, I drop things. I get clumsy. I rush, I start to notice I'm not processing emotion in real time. When I'm rushing, I tend to make very poor choices. So the habit of rushing or feeling absolutely as though everything is urgent and this idea of that distress, that high reactivity to a situation it doesn't serve me well. So when I notice I'm rushing, I really do my best to stop what I'm doing immediately, take a few breaths, slow down, and start again. So I pull myself back with the rushing behavior. Another one that I want to share with you here, is a habit that I work on to minimize is avoiding. I will go to great lengths to avoid certain things that I do not like. You can call it procrastination, you can call it protest behavior. I have a tendency of avoiding. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not confident that I can do hard things. I hit the wall every once in a while where I'm not interested in doing hard things sometimes. I just sometimes will avoid something because it's easier for me to just put my head down and lone wolf it than it is to, for example, ask for help. Speaking of asking for help, I just this past weekend we celebrated 2 weekends ago now. I guess we celebrated the practice of Easter, and I again was on the road between basketball and work, and I was thinking to myself, "Oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to put together the children's Easter baskets." So I decided to ask for help. But because it's me and I find asking for help sometimes can be challenging, I invented something this past Easter, which I can't believe I haven't told about yet. I'm very proud of this. It's called, are you ready for this? Spy bunnies. I invented spy bunnies. So instead of me trying to put together 4 Easter baskets for my nearest and dearest, I asked ChatGPT to randomly assign the people in our household to another person in this household. And they were that person's spy bunny, which meant, similar to a Secret Santa, that they were responsible for that person's Easter basket. And I loved this practice. I highly recommend this practice because I didn't have to worry about navigating 4 Easter baskets. I just did one. And I loved what it was like watching the children open their Easter baskets in some of the cases from their sibling and vice versa. And it was so much fun. It was so much easier because it's really easy to get one Easter basket from things you can buy in an airport gift shop. Thank you, Hudson, versus trying to get interesting things for 4 people in an airport gift shop. So, Spy Bunnies, highly recommend it. So, I was avoiding asking for help until I found a strategy I like to call now Spy Bunnies. Highly recommend it for Easter. And yes, I understand this has nothing to do with like the religious component of Easter. This is the absolute commercial side of Easter. Spy bunnies, I highly recommend it. Okay, so that was the other habit. 2 other ones that I wanted to share with you. This one I call mental gymnastics. I find that when I have a lot on the go, I will start trying to do mental gymnastics to try and problem solve. And I don't use the practice of making the invisible visible. And I sometimes get stuck in my head trying to figure things out. And what often happens is I'm juggling too many things in my head. Something's going to get dropped, something is going to get missed. So I notice when I'm kind of in my head and it's getting really noisy and really cluttered that's a cue for me that I need to stop doing mental gymnastics. The example I shared actually on my podcast with Peter just recently was this idea. Another example of mental gymnastics for me was I noticed I literally was experiencing like psychological warfare in my closet, meaning that every time I went into my closet, it was so disorganized. There was things that didn't fit. There were things that I felt guilty donating or giving away because somebody gave it to me. And I just had this experience of like mental warfare, psychological warfare every time I went into my closet. And the mental gymnastics about, oh, how do I navigate this? Where do I find that thing I'm looking for? And finally, I was like, enough. And I took the time to actually sort that space, got that space back to a place where there's a sense of ease with going into the closet now because I see what I need to see and I know where things are. So, mental gymnastics, a little bit of psychological warfare, realizing I needed to just make action. And I found that was helpful. And the last little habit hinderer that I do my best to start to release and move on from is when I notice I'm making my non negotiables negotiables. Okay. When I'm making my non negotiable, like going for a walk in the morning, when I start negotiating that, as in, like, oh, I'll go later, or I don't have time to do that today. A non-negotiable is, by the very definition, a non-negotiable for a reason. It means it's something that needs to get done for many different reasons. And if I notice I start negotiating with any of the things that I say I don't negotiate with, that is a habit hinderer that I'm working to release. Okay, sports fans, I hope that was useful for you. I'm more than happy to keep the conversation going about habits. If you do have any more wonderments, curiosities, please reach out. Thank you for listening today to Resiliency Redefined. I look forward to answering anything that is top of mind for you. So please keep your questions rolling in, your comments. If there's something in here that you felt was useful, as I say, please feel free to pass it along and share it with a friend. That is one of the best ways to support this podcast and keep it commercial free. So thanks, everyone. Take good care. And I'm excited to see how your habits help and perhaps maybe hinder, but how we can set them on the right trajectory to improve the quality of your day. Take good care, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.